The literal light at the end of the tunnel was much farther than it had initially seemed from inside the cavern. I didn't know how long I'd been walking before I realized my legs were shaking. At first, I thought it was just the cold, or shock, or the fact that I'd almost drowned, then cried, then talked to someone who wasn't supposed to exist anymore, and then punched my way through a crystal wall like I was in a dream I'd suddenly taken control over. But it wasn't the cold air. It was my body and my mind. It was everything finally catching up. I saw him. I had actually seen him and talked with him. My dad. He spoke with me as if he were really there in that cavern with me. I thought of the cavern and the crystal-covered walls. Their blue pulsing light filled the space, the memories displayed and scattered throughout. I still couldn't believe what had just happened. Those crystals, Crystallis, I thought, had to be the same thing Gark had been rambling on about when we were making our way through the old connection tunnel. He had laughed at me when I asked him about Crystallis, like it was ridiculous that I didn't already know what it was. I told him we don't have something like that in our world, but he scoffed anyway. He rambled on about mines and tunnels, and the old work he and his teams were commissioned to do for the council. But eventually, he told us more about the very tunnel we'd been walking in. It was under the mountain and had been sealed off years ago. A priority passageway, as he called it, one that once connected Erovia to the Tundral Hollow mine. He mentioned that back then, Crystallis was pulled from deep underground, everywhere they could find it. I'd asked why it mattered so much, why they needed so much of it. He shrugged and didn't really answer. He only smirked and said the council paid well. Miners and workers were compensated more than fairly for a time, until suddenly the council pulled the plug on them and they never set foot down there again. The way he talked about it all made it clear he'd been down there himself many times. Maybe he'd seen what Crystallis did. I mean, he had to have seen it, and now I had as well. I finally reached the light guiding me out and stumbled through a low entrance, one that spat out the small babbling stream I'd been walking beside, and out into daylight so bright it hurt my eyes for a second. The light wasn't warm, though. The air was much thinner than what I'd been breathing the last several hours. Thick gray clouds had started to move in, making it feel even cooler, like a wet fall day. Gark had warned about the air getting heavy and musky before we made our way down that abandoned tunnel to rescue Louisa and Kai. Behind me, the tunnel mouth was just a narrow, dark cut in the stone, tucked low along a slope of broken boulders and scrubby weeds. From inside it, I swear I could still hear the faint rush of water off in the distance. The same sound that had violently carried me through darkness and led me to that cave of Crystallis. This stream must have branched off from that river, like it was venturing off on its own. I swallowed hard, then looked around, determined not to look back, because if I looked back again, I might not be able to keep moving forward. Sitting still wasn't going to do anything for me. The air outside smelled different from Erovia. Less pine, less bread, less smoke. Out here, it smelled like dirt and wind, and a faint musky scent, like the clouds were getting ready to storm soon. I turned slowly and took in the world around me. The tundral hollow sat off in the distance, its fog dense as it clung to twisted trees. A gray smear nestled in the middle of the endless, sprawling meadow. To my right, Mount Crystalia rose in the distance, huge and jagged against the sky, its ridges sharp like it had teeth. Sitting at the mountain's base, spread wide and sprawling like it hadn't stopped growing, was the massive tree city, Erovia. The enormous village of tree houses, cave dwellings, treetop bridges, glowing windows, and hanging lanterns. It looked peaceful from here. It almost looked normal. The sight of it should have made me feel better. Instead, my stomach tightened, filled with anxiety for my sister. Even though I was confident this time that she was safe, it still made me fear the worst. No, I shook my head. I couldn't think of the worst. Louisa is safe. She's gotta be. The crumbling tunnel stuck in the forefront of my mind, but I was determined not to let it worry me. They got out. I know they did. And that was when I noticed it. In the distance, beyond the shimmering meadow, at the point where the ground and sky met, was the void wall. It had closed in on Noctavere even more. It was still far off in the distance, but now, everywhere I turned, I could see it. It seemed to have reached the meadow's edge here in the middle of Noctavere, and it might only be a matter of days or hours before it closed in on us over here, or on Arovia. After a deep, shaky breath, I started walking quickly downhill toward Arovia, one careful step at a time. My still-soaked black shoes crunched over loose stone and brittle grass. I kept expecting my legs to give out, but they didn't. They just kept moving. I tried not to think about Kai. I tried not to picture him struggling on the rocky tunnel floor with Drock on top of him, puncturing his thick scales with his talons. I tried not to hear Louisa's scream, not to picture the moment the ground split and swallowed me up. But of course I did anyway. My mind can be cruel like that. It shows me what I didn't ask for. It replays the worst moments in perfect clarity, like it wants to see if I'll flinch or crumble each time it runs through my head. It's funny how bad memories can do that. Be persistent, like they have a mind of their own. I shook off a shiver that ran through me and kept walking. I tried to focus on something else as I walked. My stomach growled, so my mind naturally drifted to food. I thought of the delicious bread and honey I had in the hospital. I imagined freshly baked pies, flaky pastries, and berry tarts as Flurry's voice echoed in my mind. She had been so excited to show me Floria. I gently ran my hands along the long meadow grass as my mind drifted to home. My home in the real world. The meals Mom would make. I was always amazed by what she could create. If I really enjoyed something, she'd ask if it was a college meal, a recipe I'd bring with me if I went off to college. I smiled at the thought as my stomach grumbled even louder. As I got closer to Arovia, the sounds started to return. Not fully, but enough that I heard movement, voices, wings flapping, a distant shout. In fact, the closer I got, the more I could tell something was wrong. Did they see the void coming? It didn't seem like anyone was panicking yet. The same massive, bustling village sounds from earlier still echoed through the trees. As I made it inside the front gate, the trees grew thicker, their trunks wide and dark, rope bridges and platforms appearing overhead like a second city suspended in the air. Lanterns were still lit, even though it was daytime. They helped against the gray light from the clouds. Then I saw the hospital. The giant tree with the carved, glowing green plus symbol, and in front of it, near the doors. "Gark?" I said, surprised and almost confused. Relief hit me as I broke into a short run toward him. The short, dark mole was waddling forward, shoulders hunched, his stubby legs moving quickly as he exited the hospital's large glass doors. I froze as I noticed both of his arms were bandaged up. My chest tightened so fast it almost hurt. "Gark?" I said, a bit louder this time, my voice coming out like a rasp. He stopped and turned toward me. His small black eyes widened so much they looked like buttons about to pop out of his face. For a second, he just stared at me like I was a ghost. Then he made a weird sound, something halfway between a squeak and a laugh, and rushed toward me as fast as his stubby legs could carry him. "Ivory!" he burst out, his voice high with disbelief. You're alive," I finished for him, my throat tightening as a smile spread across my face. He grabbed my arm with both pink paws like he needed to confirm I was solid. His grip was rough, but not unkind. His claws left faint pressure marks through my sleeve. I thought... He trailed off, then swallowed hard. That chasm just opened up out of nowhere, and I landed in water. A river, I said quietly. Gark's shoulders sagged with relief so heavy it made him look older. A perplexed expression crossed his face, and he stared off into the distance, his eyes darting around like he was calculating something. Water? He asked, baffled. Well, I'll be, kid. I know those mines, and I never once saw any signs of water running deeper below that tunnel. He squinted like he was rearranging the mines in his head. Makes a bit more sense now why the floor collapsed on you like that. Now, if only we'd finished that blasted minecart track back when. Gark? I said, cutting through his rambling. Where's Louisa? Is she okay? I asked, already trying to look through the hospital's glass doors as if she might be in there. And he blinked like he had to pull himself back into the moment. Your sister? He asked, then nodded quickly. Ah, of course, yes. She's safe. My heart lurched. Where? I demanded, a little too sharply. Where is she? He pointed with one stubby paw toward the paths leading deeper into Erovia. She made it to the inn. The tree one. Treetop, I think. She's with that white rabbit. She insisted on taking her back. Stubborn one, your sister. We almost had to tie her up and carry her out of that tunnel. He huffed. I swear, she would have jumped into the chasm after you if she had the chance. I couldn't help the huge smile spreading across my face. A strange warmth hit my chest. She's safe. She's safe and alive. My knees nearly gave out right there in front of the hospital, but I forced them to hold. And Kai? I asked, my chest tightening. Gark's beady eyes drooped, and he looked down at the ground. Ah, the marshing. He gave me a soft look and shook his head. That cut like a knife, and my whole body went stiff. And Flint? I asked, trying to push forward, my throat noticeably tightening. Gark's face pinched. He's out scouting the void wall with more guards, he said. Did you see it? It's gotten closer. Much closer. And soon... He looked down, worried. All of Noctavere could be... I don't know if... We're surrounded. It really doesn't look good. My throat tightened. What's going to happen? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I don't know, he whispered. There's talk of evacuation, but... He stared into space. Where? All that's left is Mount Crystalia, 'cause I ain't sharing my shop, he grumbled. I swallowed hard and looked up the road toward the mountain's base. I could see it extending into the sky through the city's canopy. Gark's right. Where is there left to go? Other than inside the mountain itself, I didn't have time to let the fear settle in my chest. Not now. But before I could run off, something hit me. Hard. Flurry? I blurted. His face shifted. What's a flurry? I ignored him as I ran to the glass doors and shoved inside. The hospital lobby hit me with warm wood, herbs, and lantern light. It felt calmer than outside, almost too calm, like the whole place was holding its breath. Ms. Debbie sat behind her desk, her gold-rimmed glasses low on her beak. She looked up at me slowly, and her droopy eyes widened. Oh, she breathed, like the sight of me didn't quite register in her brain. You're back, dear. Hi, yes, I said quickly. Where's Flurry? The hamster, white fur, red scarf. She was here upstairs. Ms. Debbie's feathers puffed slightly as she gathered herself. She left this morning, she said calmly. Her gaze flicked down to my soaked shoes and then back up. Oh dear, is it raining out? I looked at my shoes, then out the hospital doors, and back at her, confused. Oh, no. Do you know where she could be? I asked, almost impatiently. Ms. Debbie blinked slowly. I'm not sure, dear. I'm sorry. I didn't reply and bolted back outside. Maybe she's over at the inn, too? When I exited the hospital, I spotted Gark just a few feet down the road from where we'd talked a minute ago. He was fidgeting with his bandages. Gark, I said, and he jolted upright like I'd startled him. Thank you. For everything. For helping us through the tunnel and helping us save my sister. His eyes widened again like he didn't know what to do with gratitude. He shrugged awkwardly. I mean, I couldn't let a human kid die in a mine. Not if I had something to say about it. That'd be quite embarrassing for my entire species, he muttered. A shaky laugh escaped my throat despite myself. Go, Gark said, suddenly serious. Get to your sister. He hesitated. She's been holding it together, but barely. Tough kid, that one. I nodded once, then turned and ran down Arovia's main road, passing countless homes and shops built directly into or around the massive trees. A large market toward the end of the road caught my eye. Everyone inside seemed to be frantically shopping. A tall, dark blue bird with a black beak had her arms full of baskets filled with food and other supplies. I noticed 4 smaller birds that all resembled her, all only reaching her waist. Her children. They seemed to have no idea what was going on, that the void was on its way. One of them chased another while the other 2 touched everything they could reach as their mother stood counting what she carried. I turned where the main path jutted off to the left and continued through Arovia as quickly as I could. I remembered the general direction the treetop inn was in, but I still felt like I could get lost at any turn, so I asked a few animals along the way to make sure I stayed on course. Past rows of trees with perfectly aligned carved windows, past groups of people sharing a common worried energy, while others still seemed to be going about their day despite the void only being a handful of miles away. I saw soldiers hurrying toward the base of Mount Crystalia. A pair of Arovian soldiers carried crates of supplies toward the mountain caves, and my eyes wandered back toward the middle of the village at the mountainside. I could see the entrance to the banquet cavern. My stomach turned as I was reminded of Mom. I'll get Louisa, and we'll go see Mom. Mom will know what to do. I reached the base of the treetop inn, the massive spiral of cottage-like tree houses rising like a tower. The lobby buzzed, but the buzz wasn't happy. It was filled with worry. A few Florians looked up at me as I entered, and their eyes widened. Some stared like I was a miracle, while others stared like I was a problem. I didn't care anymore. I focused on the staircase leading back outside toward the upper rooms and started up before anyone could stop me. My legs burned halfway up and my lungs still felt sore and wrong, like they hadn't fully recovered from taking in all that water. But I didn't stop until I reached the cottage Amby had been staying in and hastily knocked a bit too hard. The door cracked open and Louisa's face appeared, dirty, tired, her eyes swollen red, and for a split second, we just stared at each other like neither of us believed it. Her eyes went from glazed-over exhaustion to wide shock in an instant. Then she made a sound, small and broken, and launched herself at me.
Ivory!
She sobbed. I caught her and held her so tightly it almost hurt. My hands clutched her hoodie like holding onto her could somehow fix everything.
You're here.
Louisa whispered against my shoulder.
You're here. You're...
I'm here, I said, my own voice cracking. I'm here. Amby stood behind Louisa, paws pressed to her mouth. Tears streamed down her furry cheeks. Oh, thank goodness, Amby whispered. Louisa pulled back and grabbed my arms, scanning my face and body like she still didn't believe I was real.
Where were you?
She asked, almost accusingly, shaking her head.
I thought you. I mean, the ground. It just collapsed and.
It did, I said quietly. Louisa's eyes widened.
Then how?
I opened my mouth to tell her about the rushing water and the chrysalis and the cavern and Dad. But the words stalled behind my teeth, not just because if I said it out loud, I feared it might sound like nonsense, but because Louisa's eyes were still too full of fear, and I knew what mattered more right now. Later, I whispered. I'll tell you later. We have to do something first. I thought of Mom. Louisa's brow furrowed, but she nodded quickly like she didn't have the energy to argue. Then I took a breath and said it. Louisa, Mom is here. Louisa blinked.
What?
She said, her eyes narrowing. Mom, she's here, in Arovia, I said, my voice tightening. She's the elder of Noctavere. Louisa stared at me like I was crazy, like I had hit my head during the fall.
The elder. Wait, what?
She breathed.
Wait, Ivory, what are you talking about?
Her surprise shifted into confusion. She's here, I said firmly. In Arovia. I saw her. Louisa's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flashed with confusion first, then anger, then something softer and scared. She shook her head like she was trying to wake herself up.
How? I mean, did she get sucked into the portal, too?
Yes, I half lied, remembering the larger, almost human-like glue mine that had gently carried her sick, lifeless body into the void back at St. Joseph's. Amby made a small sound, like she didn't want to interrupt but couldn't help herself. Wait, the elder is a human? She asked, shocked. I nodded, and Louisa's eyes filled with tears so fast it startled me.
Mom's here?
She whispered, a smile beginning to form despite the tears spilling down her face.
But, like, is she in the hospital or something?
She stammered. I shook my head. No, she's actually okay. Come on, let's go. Let's go see her right now, I said quickly. I'm sure the council will want to talk to you anyway, about the Nocturne's keep, what you saw, and everything. Louisa wiped her face hard and nodded, determined.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
She grabbed Amby's paw.
Amby, come with us.
She said, concern filling her voice. Amby looked both terrified and confused as she stared back at her blonde friend, her eyes shifting from Louisa to me and back again. Then she nodded. All right, she whispered. I'll come. We headed out of the inn together, but didn't even make it down the stairs before we all felt it. A low, powerful rumble rolled through the air, and the entire inn shivered beneath us. It wasn't like the other earthquakes we'd felt before. This was deep, slow, and strong, like something enormous was shifting its weight across the land.
What was that?
Louisa gasped. Only seconds later, another rumble came, longer this time. The tree hotel creaked and seemed to sway despite its massive trunk. The three of us exchanged worried glances and hurried down the stairs and out into the street to the sight of villagers running around in panic. Some Arovians pointed toward the outskirts while shouting directions. Soldiers yelled over each other, directing people toward the mountain paths. Evacuate! Head to the caves! Leave your homes, now! Bring only what you can carry, they shouted. I grabbed Louisa's hand, and she held Amby's as we turned with the crowd and ran toward the mountain, toward the banquet cavern entrance carved into the rock near the center of town. The light above the canopy looked wrong, dim, almost like it was evening already. But when I looked harder through the gaps in the leaves and branches, I realized it wasn't the sun setting. It was what towered over Arovia, blocking the day's light and casting its massive shadow across the entire village. The void. It had reached Arovia. Luisa's hand tightened around mine, and I focused on our destination ahead. Mount Crystalia loomed behind Arovia, seeming even larger now that the void was trying to compete against it. We reached the cavern entrance with other large groups of panicking animals and shoved inside. Inside, it was chaos. Council members shouted. Soldiers delivered frantic reports. Villagers streamed in carrying bundles of belongings and crying children. Crowds packed the cavern with crates, sacks, and supplies. I looked toward the far end of the cavern at the stone staircase leading to the council chambers and the door beside it. Her room. Both were closed. I scanned the entire bustling room, searching desperately for any sign of her. Taller animals made it difficult to see, but she wasn't there. No elder, no mom. I pulled Louisa with me as we squeezed past a pair of arguing marshing lizards, weaved through a family of foxes, and reached the staircase when a familiar voice called my name. I turned toward it and saw Kelanira's maroon feathers flashing through the crowd as she pushed toward us. Her eyes widened when she saw us. "Girls," she said breathlessly. "Thank the skies."
Where is she?
Louisa blurted.
Where's our mom?
Kelanira's face tightened. She looked briefly at Ambe, who still wore a stunned expression over the fact that the elder not only existed, but was human. Then Kelanira's eyes met mine, and the look she gave me made me think she already knew I had the answer to Louisa's question. "The elder, she's not here," she said quickly. Confusion spread across my face. "What?" I asked. "Where?" "She went to the summit," Kelanira said, her eyes darting between Louisa and me like she was bracing for our reaction. "The summit?" I asked, the word catching in my throat. Louisa made a small sound, almost like a trapped sob. She looked down, confused and stunned by what Kelanira was saying. Kelanira nodded sharply. "She—" Before she could continue, another rumble tore through the village, louder than before. The entire cavern groaned as it shook. Then something sounded in the distance. The closest thing I could compare it to was an explosion. The entire cavern instantly fell silent. Kelanira's eyes widened, and she instinctively began pushing toward the exit. We followed. When we stepped outside, we saw the void. Down the main road below, just beyond the gates to Arovia. It stood there, like it had knocked on the city's door and was waiting for a reply. Then the sound came again, but this time, it came from above. Slowly, we all looked upward through the treetops toward whatever was causing the terrifying noise. The void had begun to extend. Not forward, not downward into the city, upward, toward the mountain's peak. Dark strands rose into the clouds, bending inward like a web being pulled tight. It wasn't just a wall anymore. It was forming something over the village, a shape, a giant dome. And the highest point of it seemed to reach directly above Mount Crystalia, its summit. Kelanira's eyes widened, and she turned sharply toward Louisa and me. "You must hurry," she said. "Go! Now!" She waved toward a bird standing near the cavern entrance, the large albatross that had flown me here earlier. "Papi." He swooped down in front of us with the gondola frame already in his talons. He didn't say his slogan. He didn't even smile. His face was serious, focused, and his eyes scanned the sky like he was hunting something invisible. "Get in," he said quickly. I climbed inside, my hands shaking, and reached for Luisa's hand. Louisa turned and grabbed Amby's paw.
Amby,
She shouted. "I'll see you again!" Louisa whispered fiercely, like a promise. Amby grabbed Louisa's hand tightly with both paws. "Be safe," she whispered, barely audible over the commotion of the crowd and the loud hum of the void. Louisa's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded hard. Then, with a faint whimper, she let go. The safety bar lowered over the two of us as Pobby launched upward, our lives secured tightly in his massive talons. The village quickly dropped away beneath us, now looking like a painting. Panic moved through the streets like the river that had pulled me through the darkness earlier. Stampedes of villagers racing toward the mountain caves. From up here, they looked like trails of ants. Then we broke through the canopy, and suddenly the top of Arovia became fully visible below. The void had surrounded us. It wrapped around the mountain and village like a cage. We could see the top of it stretching endlessly in every direction, like a sea of writhing purple and black. Noctavere was consumed. Suddenly, like thick bolts of smoky lightning, dark, squiggling streams shot down from the void into the village below. Louisa and I screamed. Glue mines. They formed in bursts, like heavy smoke condensing into swirling bodies. Even from up here, I could see them grabbing at fleeing villagers. Louisa made a sound like she couldn't breathe.
no. No.
She whispered, clutching her hoodie strings tightly with both hands. Pobby continued climbing, but as we neared the summit, the gondola suddenly jerked violently. We screamed, clinging to the bar. I looked up in horror. A glue mine was latched onto him. It looked small against his massive albatross frame, but its grip was powerful. Its inky arms wrapped around his body, dragging him downward. Pobby roared. "Hold on!" he shouted, voice straining. The gondola dipped sharply. Wind screamed past my ears, and for one horrifying second, I was sure this was it. We were going to fall. Pobby dropped the gondola. My stomach shot into my throat as we began to freefall. Louisa screamed my name. I couldn't even scream. It felt like slow motion. The void had won. Then, as we fell, I saw Pobby dive after us like a missile. The glue mine still clung to him like a parasite, but in one violent flick of his massive body, he finally tore it free and sent it vanishing into the treetops below. Pobby surged toward us, caught the gondola frame in his talons, and yanked us back into the air. The jolt felt like whiplash. Louisa sobbed loudly, clutching the gondola frame with shaking hands. I gripped the bar in front of me and realized I was breathing rapidly, like I was moments away from hyperventilating. Pobby didn't slow down. He reached a ridge on the mountainside and swung the gondola onto the rocky surface. It slammed hard against the stone as he released it. "Go!" he shouted breathlessly. "Up that path. Summit's right there." He motioned with a twitch of his head. "Pobby," I started. He shook his head and gestured toward his left wing. It was deformed, broken. "I can't keep flying," he panted. "My wing's done for." "What do we do?" I blurted. "The path." Pobby pointed with his good wing toward a narrow trail climbing higher along the mountain. "That'll get you to the summit." He sucked in another breath, and neither Louisa nor I expected what he said next. "The elder will get you home from there." Then, with a quick leap from the ledge, he dove downward, stopping every few seconds to flap with his good wing and slow his descent until he disappeared into the city canopy below. Louisa and I stood frozen on the ledge, the wind whipping our hair and clothes. We instinctively clung to each other and stepped away from the edge. The wind up here was stronger, and the air felt thin. We both shrieked as the empty gondola frame suddenly blew over and clanged loudly onto its side. I looked to our left. The narrow mountain path stretched upward, with a thick rope railing bolted into the stone. Behind us, on the opposite side of the ledge, was a tunnel opening, probably a way down. But we weren't going down. We were going up. Luisa's hand crushed mine. "Come on," I said. Together, we gripped the rope railing and started climbing the path. One step, then another. Up toward the summit. Up toward our mother. Up toward the place where the void had decided to meet the sky.